Ever since the day that you went away, you went away.
Hi guys, my name is Andra and I make pop culture and influencer commentary. Today's video, I thought we could commemorate the fact that the Arcana game is approaching its final chapters. I'm a little bit sad, but at the same time I would like to see how it ends, so I'm excited and sad at the same time. And I just thought we could discuss something that is not really talked about altogether. I've seen snippets, mostly on Tumblr, of people talking about bits and pieces of the stuff that I'm going to be bringing up in this video, but I thought I would make a kind of essay putting all of this together, the inspirations for the Arcana game, be it from literature or movies or real life history or real life cultures. It's a mix of a lot of things and I thought it would be quite interesting to talk about it. So I think the way we're gonna do it is by different sections, starting with modern pop culture and then going back in time to historical events and things like this that could have inspired the game. So starting with modern references, the character Lucio has a lot of references to pop culture, including Disney movies such as Mulan and Lion King, Mad Max, he says "witness me" at some point, which is really fun, and the Phantom of the Opera. And a lot of the story is actually inspired by the Phantom of the Opera, but for now I'm just gonna talk about Lucio and then bring it back later. So it feels like they wanted his character to be like this and just talk about a lot of different things that are more modern for kind of the audience to see these little Easter eggs, I guess. And I thought that's really fun and a really good way to do it. Another thing that I've noticed, and I don't know where it originates from, in one of the routes, I'm not gonna give spoilers just in case people are not caught up, but in one of the routes, when the clock strikes midnight at the masquerade, people start dancing as if in a trance, as if they have no control over their movements. And this made me think of Melanie Martinez. Her movie K-12 has a bit like that, but obviously I don't think it's her original idea. I think it must have come from a book or something, but that's what it made me think of, so I'm gonna put it in this category. Other people, as well as myself, have noticed that Nadia gives out a lot of vibes related to the Crimson Peak movie, which is really weird because her cultural background is entirely different from the cultural background of the characters in that movie, but it does have some parallels. Asra's character, in his design, he has clear parallels with House Moving Castle, and you can see that for yourself. Obviously it's very, very obvious, I think, and I'm just gonna be referring to Asra as a he for the purpose of this video. I know the character is supposed to be non-binary, but he goes by he in the game, so we're just gonna do that, but don't worry, I'm aware. So, and now going back a bit with books and literary references. The most notable literary reference is obviously The Mask of the Red Death by Edgar Allan Poe. I believe that the developers said that they didn't actually take inspiration from this, but this leads me to my second point, in which The Phantom of the Opera is a direct reference, and that is obvious because they do reference it through Lucio's dialogue. So they must have taken inspiration from Phantom of the Opera, and Phantom of the Opera, the masquerade scene, takes some inspiration from the Mask of the Red Death, so it will make sense. For those of you who don't know, the Mask of the Red Death is about this plague that the nobles are hiding from. So they are hiding in like underground, where this noble is hosting all of them, and they're having different parties and balls and masquerades, and at some point when he holds the biggest masquerade to kind of stop people from being worried about the plague from outside, this figure with a skeleton mask comes and starts killing people, and all the rooms have like different colors in that underground mansion. All the rooms have different colors, and this mask, when the noble Duke Prosper, which by the way is also in Arcana, so I believe that even though they might not have referenced it at the start of the game, they read it in the meantime and actually referenced it later on. So Duke Prosper takes off the mask of the hooded figure with the skeletal mask, and there's nothing underneath it because he is the death and the plague, and it's kind of like the nobles try to let the peasants and the poor people die and hide away so that they don't die instead of caring about the people, so that is his punishment. Everybody died at the end. And then in Phantom of the Opera, there is a masquerade in which the Phantom himself, because he's in love with Christine and Christine is in love with someone else, he comes to the masquerade with a red mask, which is inspired by this. Obviously, he's supposed to be deaf because he challenges the other people in a way with the play that he wrote for Don Quixote. So I would recommend reading this because it's tiny, as you can see, like it's only a few pages and it's actually amazing. It's really terrifying, especially now we're living through a pandemic, so plagues and all that is not really a good topic right now, but it's very insightful and it's great. And I think Lucio's like a mix of a lot of characters, because in his introduction scene, when you go to the wing where he used to live and you see his ghost, it's kind of reminiscent of the Beauty and the Beast because of his animal-like appearance, and he's terrifying. And I believe that in the old prologue, before they changed it, it used to be referencing the Beauty and the Beast as well. Another reference from Edgar Allan Poe is not in The Mask of the Red Death, but in his poem The Raven, because obviously one of the animals that the characters have, one of the familiars or whatever you want to call them, is a raven, which symbolizes death. A lot of the stuff is paralleling Dante's Inferno and the whole deal with the devil idea, but that's not only in Dante's Inferno, but I think that's where they took it from directly. The portrait of Dorian Gray could be related to Lucio and his obsessive behavior when it comes to destroying the portraits where he was young before because he died. And his obsession with youth in general could come from the portrait of Dorian Gray, maybe. A lot of the inspiration also comes from religious books, and most notably the Bible. The 4 courtiers come from the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Either your apprentice or Julian could parallel Lazarus from the Bible as well. The number 3 is important in most religions, not just Christianity, but I forgot to mention it. It's 3 years since Lucio died, 3 years since your character died, 3 years since nobody can remember anything, 3 years since the last masquerade. So I think that time is intentional. I don't think it's just like a random number. The devil is obviously not directly inspired by Christianity in tarot. It means something else, but I feel like this devil, the character himself, the way that he behaves, is a combination of the tarot devil and the Christian devil, or Abrahamic religion devil rather, because it's not only in Christianity. And now, since we talked about the number 3, I'm gonna mention other numerology details. The clock striking 12 in the story during the masquerade is important because the 13th card in tarot is card for death. So I do feel like the numbers and the times and the years and all that are intentional. All the familiars are inspired by different mythological aspects which kind of match up with the character that they are the familiars of. So I mentioned how Julian's familiar Malak is a raven, which symbolizes death. And now on to Nadia's familiar, Chandra, I believe it was her name. The owl symbolizes wisdom. It comes from Greek mythology and many other mythologies as well. Asra's snake Faust could be from multiple different mythologies as well, such as Native American, in which it means renewal. Viking and other mythologies as well symbolize knowledge and wisdom as a snake. Serpent. Christianity symbolizes kind of sin and temptation as a serpent, which would make sense because Asra is the one who makes the deal to bring your character back. And it's something that if you put this into the Christian perspective, it wouldn't be allowed because death is death, it's final. So if you put it into Christian mythology, this would be kind of a deal with the devil. Muriel's Wolfinana is also very important to his character because it symbolizes the way that he likes to be left alone, but at the same time, wolves, although they are stereotyped as solitary animals, they actually need a pack. So the expression lone wolf doesn't really make much sense because although that's the stereotype, they need a pack, so it kind of symbolizes the fact that Muriel needs to open up to people, which he does in some of the routes. In a lot of different mythologies, such as Native American, wolves were considered to be witches, which would make sense because Muriel kind of practices a form of witchcraft by using talismans and other things from Asra. Although Asra is the prime witch example in the game, Muriel is kind of adjacent to witchcraft culture. In Norse folklore, the Volvas, which are the witches, use wolves instead of horses. In Roman mythology, a wolf is the creature that fed Remus and Romulus, the brothers who went on to create Rome. So the wolf is really respected, and it's a motherly good creature, which also matches up with Muriel feeding all the chickens and being like all kind and all that. With Portia, I guess cats could be seen as this really independent but also loving animal, which although it can be kept around the house as a pet, it's still like partially wild. So the cats are not fully domesticated like dogs are, so it makes sense for her character as well, because she's got some of the pirate that she once was, although she's domesticated by being a servant in the house. And for Lucio, I think the animals just symbolize what he wants. He wants to be surrounded by things and people that love him, and dogs have this whole unconditional love, whereas cats are more independent. So I think that's why he chooses to surround himself with this. And the reason why they're all albino, like his bird, his weird sea creatures, his dogs, they're all albino. I think the reason for that is, one, he wants them to look like him and his tribe, because his tribe is either Germanic or Scandinavian Norse, so they would be a lot of blonde people and stuff like that. Or we can look even deeper into this and think about mythologies in which the albino people are considered as being possessed by the devil, and that includes actually Eastern Europe, where I'm from. We used to see albino people as symbolizing death and vampires. So I think it's his way of kind of appreciating the unloved and thing that most people are appalled by. I guess he wants to be loved, and he thinks he's unlovable, and so he does the same to the animals who are seen as scary by others. There is also a little weird similarity between the story of the character Muriel and Eastern European mythology and the Legend of Babayaga, which is funny because Muriel is surrounded by chicken, and Babayaga is like this forest witch who, in some of the legends, she's bad, in some of them she's helping people, so it's like all a matter of perspective. She lives in a secluded cabin in a forest, or like a little hut, which the hut stands on like chicken legs, and it like moves around the forest as she pleases, so she's like a witch. And Muriel, he more or less practices a form of witchcraft with the like herbs witchcraft and the protection spells and stuff that he does that can be kind of like witchcraft. And he's surrounded by chicken, and he lives in a hut in the middle of the forest. So I thought that's funny because that's some like Eastern European mythology for you guys, because I'm Eastern European and I love that kind of shit. And I forgot to say this when I was filming the main video, so I just thought, you know, this is like a funny thing that I might actually add, because it's not like what you would expect the story to be turned into. Another similarity that I've seen many people point out on Tumblr and like Facebook groups and different places is the similarity between this art of Julian from one of the chapters and the painting called The Desperate Man by Gustave Courbet. I think that's how you pronounce the name of the painter. Hopefully I'm not that far off. And another similarity between an artwork of Julian and several art representations of Faust when he's studying from the whole story to deal with the devil that I was talking about earlier. You can see the resemblance, because after all, Julian does make his own deal. Although not with the devil, it's still probably the reason why this has been the decision that they made. And you can see artistic similarities between the portrait that Lucio commissioned with the animal heads and the cover of the picture of Dorian Gray. And I thought that's just interesting. And there's another similarity between the other portrait of Lucio and the paintings of Saint George killing the dragon. I just thought that's also interesting. So I don't know how much of this was intentional, but I do believe that most of it was. I definitely think that the developers of the Arcana have some really, really great and extensive knowledge of the arts. I was also watching a live by the artist who drew some of Portia's sprites, and they showed the inspiration for her masquerade dress, and it looks pretty cool, so I thought I'd show you guys this one as well. And now the last point that I'm gonna get to is real life and real world cultures of the Arcana. I think a lot of symbolism with the tarot cards obviously comes from like Romani people, as well as Asra's character being a nomad is partially inspired by the Romani people, and there are some Native American symbols as well as other religions. So with Native American symbols in tarot, you could see that the world in tarot is represented by a turtle, which is how the Native Americans used to see it. They used to think that the world is a turtle, so now America, the way that they call it, because obviously they didn't choose the name America, the colonizers did, so they call it Turtle Island. So there are many other cultures, but I'm gonna go through them one by one. Location wise, because I think this kind of links it all together, I thought initially that this is inspired by the Silk Road, like the map of the Arcana world is parallel with the Silk Road, and I think there are people who kind of agree with it, but they place it in a different timeline but similar location wise. So I think that's the general consensus, is that it's more towards southern and eastern Europe and going towards Africa. So there is a map that somebody else actually did, which is really good, so I'm gonna put it on the screen and create them, because I think it kind of makes the most sense out of all the theories. So they turned the map of the Roman Empire upside down because, contrary to our world, in the Arcana, south is a colder climate and the north is a warmer climate, which doesn't make sense for us, so that's why it's upside down, which is a good idea. I didn't think of doing something like that. The Roman Empire had a lot of racial diversity because the Romans have been everywhere, and in Rome they didn't actually have a concept of racism like unfortunately the Western world does today, because if you embrace the Roman culture, you are Roman, full stop. So it makes sense that the characters are more diverse. The developers themselves said that Vesuvia is a seaside Mediterranean city-state, so if it's Mediterranean, it has to be around like Italy, Greece, Spain nowadays, if it has to work on that climate. And this person is theorizing that Praga is inspired by Rome because of their election process, and because Nadia's parents are literally titled as Empress and Emperor. And they also had different leaders for different cities. Although the Emperor was the big leader, they had like smaller leadership, which would make sense for Nadia to lead Vesuvia. They said that Nevivon is Ukraine. I think it might be Russia, but they're next to each other, so it doesn't really make a difference. They obviously have a lot of Eastern European culture in there, and as an Eastern European, I do feel like they represent quite well bits of our culture. The drinking culture, the food culture, importance of food. The grandma is acting like a standard grandma, like Mazelinka is literally like every Eastern European grandma. The names that they use, Ilya and Pasha instead of Julian and Portia, they are Eastern European names. Iliushka is like the nickname, it means little. If you put Ushka at the end, it means little, so they use that for like every single name in Russia. And this person saying that because they grew up around the pirates and the sea, that's the reason why they chose Ukraine, because of the Black Sea, which is next to my country as well, which is nice, so I'll take it. And Vesuvia could be Egypt because they have a lot of Arabic inspirations, and Asra is from there, his parents are from there, and his mother wears a hijab, so it makes sense for it to be Egypt. And Egypt was part of the Roman Empire for a long time. And if you look at this map that they found with Vesuvia, and then it looks like an area in Egypt, which is insane that most people didn't notice that, including myself. But the Arcana game developers said that the story takes place in a fantasy universe. Most of the setting inspiration is drawn from the history of the tarot, thought to be originally from Egypt or Arabia in its earliest form, and brought to Renaissance Italy, where it first started taking form as the card deck we recognize today. The city the characters live in is close to a Mediterranean-like sea and probably a crossroads for a lot of different people. And that makes sense, as I said, with what these people are saying about Italy and Egypt as well. And now on to the characters' individual nationalities, because I feel like that is a big point of contempt, or rather ethnicities or nationalities, because it's a mix of both. I think that most people agree on Asra being Arabic. Some of them think that he's Muslim. I don't see him as Muslim, but obviously the game didn't confirm any of this, so it's up to you. I think his parents may be Muslim, but the way he's acting is more like a pagan. Maybe his dad, because his dad doesn't look conventionally Muslim in the clothing that he's wearing compared to Aisha, his mom. So maybe his dad could be Romani descent because of the tarot and all the mysticism is around the Romani culture. So that's how I kind of see him, Arabic, Romani, a combination of these two. Nadia is definitely inspired by South Asian people, namely Indians. I think she would probably be multilingual due to her being a noble. She would speak Arabic. If we take Vesuvia as being from Egypt, it would be either ancient Egyptian or Arabic. So because of the way that people are dressed, I would say it's a bit later than ancient Egypt. So I would say that Nadia probably speaks Arabic and Hindi, the versions of this for their world. And then Lucio is obviously either Germanic or Scandinavian Viking because of the way that their tribe is acting, the importance of hunting and of being independent, their names. His name is literally, like the full name is Montag Morgason, and Morga's name is Morga Ersdottir, and they used son and daughter to like point out their parents, so that's why Lucio's surname is from his mom. Usually in Viking history it would be from the dad's side if the child is a boy, and from the mom's side if it's a girl. So I feel like maybe they did use Morga's name instead of Lutz. I believe it was Lucio's dad's name. I think they used Morga because Morga was the more significant person in their tribe. So yeah, I think it's Viking or Germanic. And now on to the Devoraks. Julian and Portia are obviously Eastern European. Some people consider that they're inspired by Jewish culture because of their noses and because of the fact that their name is changed from the original Slavic version onto the more Anglicized version when they moved to Vesuvia, which apparently Jewish people used to do when they were traveling from country to country. They would change the name to fit with the culture of that country, which I did not know about, but it makes sense because apparently Ilya is would be Elijah in Hebrew, and Portia would come from Pavel, which is obviously a name from the Bible. So for me, I can't like relate to that side of them, so I do see them as Eastern European representation. But then again, Eastern European Jews are still Eastern Europeans, so I think it's up to everyone how they headcanon them, and I think as long as you're respectful to the people who think differently than you. For me, I see them culturally a lot like me. We don't really have that many Jewish communities left in Romania, so I can't like tell if there are any noticeable differences in their behavior that would point towards that, because I don't have a comparison. And I think a possible counter argument, but then again, I'm not saying don't headcanon them however you want, because I'm inclined to believe that yeah, they are probably inspired by Jewish people because the devs have said that yeah, that's fine, you can headcanon it as that. I think a lot of people who are Eastern European, and when they move to the West or somewhere else, they tend to change their names to more Anglicized version anyways. I have friends of mine who do that. So I don't see it as a Jewish thing necessarily, but if historically it's been a Jewish thing, then I wouldn't know of it, so yeah. And Julian also speaks like 7 languages, which would make sense because a lot of Slavic languages are similar, so it would be easy to learn them. And he would probably, if he's inspired by Judaism and Jewish people, he would probably speak Hebrew as well. And now I kind of left Muriel for last because I think he's the more complicated character. This post is explaining why Muriel is obviously not white, because the developers confirmed that. And if you look at where Vesuvia is with the theory that I showed you before, it would make sense for it to be in Kazakhstan, where his people are. Muriel doesn't remember exactly where he's from, so even though he says he's from the south, it could just be south of Vesuvia and not as far south as where Lucio would be, which is Scandinavia in my opinion. The developers showed the cloak that he receives in his route being inspired by Kazakh designs. With Muriel's complexion being a lot darker than Lucio's, it would also make sense that he's from there, because in real life Kazakhstan's climate would be consistent with this theory, with his skin being darker. And there's also something interesting that I found out while researching for this video, that if Lucio and Morga's tribe, the Scourge, is based off of Germanic or Celtic culture, then there is a population in Kazakhstan which is Germanic. I don't know what exactly they're doing there, but they're descended from Germans who were deported to Russia, and I don't know why they never returned, but it would make sense for them to be that close to where Muriel used to live. And it would make sense with the fact that their cultures, like Lucio's tribe and Muriel's tribe cultures, are extremely different, although they don't live that far from each other. And it would still be consistent with what I have been saying about Lucio being Scandinavian or Germanic. And also there's the fact that Scandinavians and like Vikings, they reached Asia and Africa. So that could also be a potential route to go to, thinking of the Vikings and their own conquests. It makes sense. But I also think that there are some inspirations in Muriel's route to Native American spiritualism, but I don't know enough about Native American culture. He's definitely mostly Asian from the way that his tribe is behaving and the way he is portraying himself as, because obviously not all Asians are pale, so a lot of that would make sense. I think there are a lot more, but these are the ones that I've been thinking of, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I might make another Arcana video when the routes are finished, just kind of discussing my overall thoughts and how it ended. And if you guys want to see something like that, let me know. I look forward to seeing you on my channel again. If you'd like to like this video, give it a comment and tell me what you think, if I've missed something, if you disagree with anything from this video. And subscribe to my channel for more pop culture commentary, as well as influencer commentary, if that's your thing. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks, bye!